The moment still feels unreal. I was seated at the long mahogany table, reviewing final compliance notes, when Gregory Haldane's voice split the air like glass shattering. "Pack your stuff. 17 years mean nothing here." The words didn't echo. They landed heavy, flat, final. A hush swallowed the boardroom. Rows of directors and assistants froze in their seats, expressions caught between curiosity and fear. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline glittered, indifferent to the spectacle unfolding inside. 2 security guards stepped forward, their hands firm on my arms before I could even rise on my own. The grip was deliberate, not necessary. I wasn't a threat, just a statement. My badge slid from my blazer pocket, clattering onto the polished wood. That sound, sharp and metallic, cut deeper than Gregory's voice. My eyes followed where it landed, and there it was, a thick stack of contracts on the table, opened to the audit page. My name stared back at me in bold print. Natalie Prescott Compliance Authority, 17 years. And they called me non-essential. Yet my signature was still required for the deal that would define Gregory's career. He leaned back in his chair, smirking as though he had rehearsed this humiliation for weeks. "Efficiency," he announced to the silent room, proof that Brexton moves boldly, even before the billion-dollar signing. I caught a flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. A junior analyst, no older than 25, lowered her phone just slightly, its camera lens peeking out like a guilty secret. She was recording. The knowledge both stung and steadied me. My disgrace would not vanish behind closed doors. It was already on its way to becoming evidence. As the guards marched me toward the elevator, heads turned away. Screens lit up suddenly brighter. Conversations resumed in rushed whispers. My colleagues had perfected the art of silence. I'd taught half of them the very standards that kept this company afloat, yet none could raise their eyes now. The elevator doors closed with a hiss, sealing me off from the room where my career had just been executed. My heart pounded, not only from shame but from the realization that this dismissal was no accident. It was a performance, staged for investors, cameras, and headlines. And in that instant, clutching the memory of my name inked into that contract, I understood that the real fight had only just begun because those words on paper would follow me into the next chapter. My office felt smaller than I remembered, like the walls had shifted closer during the walk of shame. A cardboard box waited on my desk, already filled by someone else's hands. Framed photographs of my son, a chipped mug that had survived countless late nights, and pens I'd bought in bulk as if permanence could be planned, everything reduced to clutter, stripped of meaning. I lowered myself into the chair one last time, but the weight pressing against me wasn't the chair's frame. It was the 17 years stacked on my shoulders, every late night, every holiday forfeited, every moment I traded away for Brexton's sake pressed down on me now. My father's bypass surgery, how my sister's voice had cracked on the phone when she told me the doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night. I had stayed at my desk, combing through compliance gaps worth $500 million. He survived, but when he asked why I wasn't there, the shame had no words. My son's high school graduation, my mother's shaky video from the back of the auditorium, the grainy footage of his cap sailing into the air. I should have been in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. Instead, I was bent over audit trails for an investor review, convincing myself he would understand, and then the anniversary's candlelight replaced by fluorescent bulbs. Laughter exchanged for silence. Each sacrifice justified. Each absence excused as necessary. 4 promotions, but each came with more hours, not more recognition. I told myself loyalty would be rewarded. In truth, loyalty had been devoured. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the old leather notebook, edges worn smooth by years of my hands. Inside, neat columns recorded every overtime shift, every signature from supervisors too weary to argue. 14,200 hours. I had tallied them once, and the number had haunted me since. Not numbers anymore, years of my life siphoned away. From the hallway, Gregory's voice rang out, deliberately loud. "Proof of efficiency," he declared, announcing my removal like it was a trophy. An HR assistant passed my door, whispering just loud enough, "They want to announce this before the signing makes Gregory look bold." I lifted the box slowly, humiliation burning hotter than anger, as I stepped into the corridor. The notebook pressed against my palm, heavier than anything inside, and beneath the sting of disgrace, a question took root, one that would follow me into the next step of this unwanted journey. I set the box on the passenger seat of my car, the silence inside louder than the chaos I'd left behind. My hands trembled as I opened it, searching for something familiar, something that felt like mine. Beneath the tangle of pens and old reports, my fingers brushed against cracked leather. I pulled it out slowly, the overtime logbook I'd started my first year at Brexton. Its pages opened with a faint crack, releasing the scent of ink and age. Row after row of careful handwriting stared back at me, dates, shift times, initials from supervisors who had long since moved on or burned out. It was a ledger of sacrifice, but also of proof. 14,200 hours, every one of them recorded with the precision I had built my career on. For years, I had told myself it was nothing more than a private tally, a way of making sense of everything I had lost. Then a memory surfaced, a board directive, years old, circulated quietly during a cost-cutting frenzy. To avoid paying excessive overtime, logged hours could be converted into compliance equity rights, meaning those hours weren't just time, but authority. Everyone had dismissed it as legal filler, a trick to keep regulators satisfied. Everyone except me. I'd kept the memo, and I'd kept the hours. The realization steadied my breath. My dismissal had been loud, humiliating, meant to erase me in one blow. But the numbers in my hands carried a weight Gregory couldn't wish away. Through the open car window, voices drifted from the building's front steps. Two executives, their tones hushed but urgent, were speaking just loud enough for me to catch. The Europeans asked about her yesterday. One said, "What did Gregory tell them that she was retiring?" Wanted it framed as graceful. Clean exit, retiring. The word hit harder than fired. I hadn't chosen to leave. He had rewritten my story before the ink was dry on my termination. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was an erasure. I closed the notebook with deliberate care. Its weight, now a promise. Gregory thought he had ended me. What he didn't realize was that my presence was already woven into the very contract he wanted to parade. And that contract was waiting. The cafe across from Brexton Tower smelled of burnt espresso and buttered croissants, a world away from the sterile chill of glass boardrooms. I slid into a corner booth, set the cardboard box at my feet, and opened my laptop. My reflection stared back at me in the screen, tired, angry, and not nearly as defeated as Gregory had hoped. A new email pinged into my inbox, the subject line blank. My stomach tightened. Anonymous attachments are usually trouble, but instinct told me to open it. Inside was a forwarded chain of internal messages. Gregory's name repeated like a curse, each line colder than the last. Prescott's findings jeopardized the signing. Terminate before Thursday, bury the irregularities. Frame it as streamlining. Announce efficiency to investors. The words burned through me. I hadn't been trimmed for cost savings. I had been silenced because I'd flagged discrepancies in the very deal Gregory wanted to boast about. I was never collateral damage. I was a direct obstacle. My hands clenched around the edge of the table. I thought back to every hour I had logged, every holiday I had missed. Loyalty hadn't just been ignored, it had been weaponized against me. The clatter of plates and the hiss of the espresso machine barely registered as I read the thread again. Slower this time. It was proof. Undeniable and raw. a cover-up written in black and white, sent to too many people to ever truly disappear. Then my phone buzzed on the table. A system notification glowed across the screen. Audit verification, pending 14,200 hours. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The compliance system still recognized me, still demanded my confirmation. Without it, the 1.9B deal couldn't close. Gregory might have marched me out like a criminal, but his empire couldn't move forward without my signature. I lifted my eyes to the tower across the street. Its mirrored panels gleamed, reflecting the city as if nothing inside were rotting. But I knew the truth. The deal wasn't clean. The system was waiting for me, and the email in my inbox was a loaded weapon. And in that moment, I realized the real collapse hadn't even started yet. From my seat in the cafe, I could see straight into the upper floors of Brexton Tower. The glare of camera lights bled through the windows, flickering like a staged sunrise. Screens in the cafe broadcast the same event, Gregory standing at the head of a polished table. His smile wide, his hands spread like a statesman about to deliver history. The European delegation leaned forward, their suits crisp, their expressions measured but hopeful. Investors lined the back wall, nodding as though already counting their returns. Microphones angled toward Gregory, who soaked up the attention with the ease of a man born for performance. I pressed my hands against my cooling coffee cup, pulse hammering. The system notification from earlier still echoed in my mind. Audit verification pending. I knew the deal could not close without me. Yet there he was, basking as if nothing stood in his way. The first handshake was staged, perfectly timed for the flashbulbs. Lawyers uploaded the contract into the compliance portal, their gestures efficient, rehearsed. For a breath, it looked seamless. Then the projection screen behind Gregory stuttered, flickering from the contract's text to a bold red overlay. Error, missing audit authority signature Prescott. Natalie. The cafe fell silent. Even the espresso machine hissed into quiet. On screen, the journalists froze mid-note, cameras raised again in a frenzy. The Europeans exchanged quick glances, confusion edging into irritation. Gregory's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. He lifted his hand like a conductor calming an orchestra. "Minor glitch," he said smoothly, his voice amplified for the press. "Our system is robust. This will refresh in a moment." But it didn't refresh. The error repeated, pulsing larger, brighter, my name emblazoned across every feed. Prescott, Natalie, the woman they had fired hours ago, the woman they had paraded out as disposable. Reporters shouted questions. Photographers swarmed closer to capture his tightened jaw. Gregory adjusted his tie with forced composure, but the sweat beating at his temple betrayed him. I sat frozen in the cafe, watching the truth blaze across the world in letters too large to ignore. The performance was unraveling, and my name had become the center of the stage. The error message pulsed once more across the massive projection screen, and then the system delivered its final blow, contract void in 21:00. A countdown timer appeared in the corner, the digits ticking mercilessly down. The room inside Brexton Tower, visible on every live feed, erupted into chaos. The Europeans leaned into one another, whispering in clipped tones, their eyes darting between Gregory and the glowing screen. Lawyers bent over their laptops, fingers flying, desperate to override the system. Investors in the back fumbled with their buzzing phones, panic spreading across their faces as real-time market alerts hit their inboxes. Gregory raised both hands, voice straining to remain calm. "Refresh the system. Just refresh it. This is nothing." But whispers cut through his command. "Why is her name there?" The question rippled like a current, swelling louder as staff and guests alike realized what the system was demanding me. In the cafe, I watched the seconds bleed away. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the system. A notification banner flashed across the top of my screen. "Video upload complete." My heart lurched. The analyst from the boardroom. She had sent the recording into the world. I clicked the link. The footage played in an endless loop, Gregory's voice bellowing, "Pack your stuff." 17 years mean nothing. The camera trembled as it captured security gripping my arms, my badge hitting the table with that metallic clatter. In the corner of the frame, the contract was visible, my name stamped clearly on its pages. Within minutes, the clip had spread everywhere. Social media feeds overflowed, fired compliance director's name still required for 1.9B deal. Two narratives collided in real time. On one screen, the world watched me humiliated, discarded like trash. On another, the compliance system refused to proceed without me. The timer ticked down, 16:42, 16:41, 16:40. Its glow reflected in Gregory's sweat-soaked face. His voice wavered as he tried to reassure the press, but even his smile cracked at the edges. Across the street, I sat motionless, coffee long cold. As the world finally began to see what I had always known, Brexton's empire wasn't built on his charisma. It was held together by my work, my hours, my name, and the clock was still ticking. The digits on the compliance screen bled down to 0. No override, no miracle, no saving face. The final second vanished, and with it, the deal. The conference room went silent for a beat, as if even the air had been stunned. Then the sound of briefcases snapping shut echoed like gunfire. The lead European delegate stood, his voice measured but unyielding without proper authorization. "This deal cannot proceed." Chairs scraped across the polished floor as they gathered their documents, refusing even the courtesy of a handshake. The press surged forward, cameras flashing with a frenzy I could feel even from across the street. On cafe televisions, the headline scrolls changed in real time. 1.9B Brexton deal implodes on live stream. Stock tickers beneath the footage bled red. Notifications poured across my phone, each one a dagger shares plummeting, investors panicking, analysts already calling it one of the fastest collapses of the decade. Gregory's face, magnified on every broadcast, told the story better than words could. His grin was gone, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting like a man trapped in his own spotlight. He tried to speak, but the murmurs around him drowned him out, directors hissing into phones, assistants scribbling frantic notes, lawyers burying their heads in laptops as though the right clause might erase what had just happened. And then it came, a single voice cutting through the chaos. A board member, silver-haired, weary but sharp, pushed back his chair and spoke into a microphone still live. "Billions lost," he said slowly, deliberately, "because you fired the only person who gave us credibility." The room shifted. Eyes that had once looked at Gregory with rehearsed admiration now turned with something darker: blame, disgust, fear of association. Cameras captured every angle, the executives squirming, the once celebrated CEO shrinking before them. I sat in the cafe, notebook on the table, hands still wrapped around the cup I hadn't touched in hours. My name had been the error on the screen, the ghost in their machine. And now it was the only name anyone could say aloud. The empire that had erased me was crumbling in front of the world, and its ruin was just the beginning of my freedom. My phone vibrated nonstop as I stepped out of the cafe and into the cooling evening air. The Brexton number flashed again and again, desperate, insistent, almost frantic. I let it ring until the sound cut off. For the first time in 17 years, I owed them nothing. Each unanswered call felt like another chain breaking, another weight lifting from my shoulders. The city around me hummed with its usual rhythm, traffic lights flickering, buses sighing to a stop, pedestrians moving past with their own burdens. Yet I felt strangely light, as though my steps no longer dragged against the years of sacrifice I had carried. The empire that had devoured my time had finally collapsed under its own arrogance, and I hadn't lifted a finger to save it. By the time I reached my apartment, the calls had stopped, but the silence was louder. I set the box of my belongings by the door and went straight to my desk, the leather notebook placed carefully on top. I stared at it, no longer seeing a record of exhaustion but a ledger of power. Then my laptop pinged. An email had arrived from an unfamiliar address. I opened it, breath catching as the subject line resolved European delegation. The message was short, formal, yet unmistakably direct. We trust you. Not him. Would you consider leading compliance as our independent advisor recognition? At last, but not from the company that had humiliated me. This was acknowledgement from those who had seen my work for what it was. Unvarnished. Indispensable. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. Accepting would mean stepping right back into the same battlefield, trading freedom for another fight. Declining meant closing the door on everything I had built. My phone buzzed once more, but this time it wasn't Brexton. A message from my son lit up the screen. Mom, come tomorrow. Let's celebrate you, not them. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from the sudden clarity of choice. For years, every decision had belonged to Brexton. Now, for the first time, it belonged to me. And as the night deepened around me, I realized tomorrow would be the day I decided what kind of life I truly wanted to live. The sky was barely awake when I stepped onto the sidewalk, the chill of dawn brushing my face. Brexton Tower loomed in the distance, its mirrored windows catching the first light like nothing had changed. But everything had. Reporters clustered at the entrance, cameras poised, voices sharp as they demanded answers Gregory could no longer spin. I caught a glimpse of him through the crowd, ducking behind aides, his posture no longer regal but hunched, cornered. The man who had paraded my humiliation could barely withstand his own. I didn't cross the street toward him. My path bent the other way, quieter, steadier. A short walk brought me to a row of modest offices tucked between a diner and a print shop. One space bore a fresh lease taped to the glass. My name stared back at me in bold black letters, Prescott Advisory Integrity and Compliance. I unlocked the door, the faint scent of paint and dust meeting me like an old friend. The room was bare except for a simple desk I'd bought used the night before, a lamp balanced on its edge, and my leather notebook placed carefully in the center. I rested my hand on it. What had once been the record of stolen years now felt like the cornerstone of something new. This office wasn't built for Brexton's glory, or Gregory's applause. It was built to protect people like me. People told their sacrifices meant nothing. People who had been erased in silence. My mission was clear: expose the corporations that thrived on exploiting loyalty, and give those employees a voice strong enough to shatter glass towers. The morning light spilled across the desk, catching the worn edges of the notebook. I opened my phone and typed a message, my fingers steady. I'm free. Dinner tonight's on me. I pressed send, picturing my son's smile, the one I had missed too many times. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I wasn't running toward a deadline or bracing for Gregory's shadow. I was walking into my own future. The greatest revenge wasn't in watching their empire collapse. It was in laying the first stone of my own.